This is Skylinberg, a historical European city that I've been building for about 100 hours now. And today I'm doing a full tour, a recap of how the city grew, how the layout formed, and the details you've probably missed along the way. If your first question is what the fuck is a Skylinberg, there's a link on screen that shows how the whole project started. The TLDR is it's a historically inspired city that began in the medieval era and progressed forward through time. Recent episodes pushed it into the early 20th century, including the air raids and the coastal defences of the Second World War. That's why there's buildings missing everywhere. Spoiler alert, they've been bombed. For returning viewers, I'm doing this now because I decided that future episodes will move decade by decade, which puts us roughly at the series midpoint. So this is a recap tour, and there'll probably be another one at the end. I'm also doing this because my gameplay doesn't always show off the broader context of where I'm building and how it all fits together, and I forget that you guys are not as familiar with the city as I am. So let's do a broad overview first. Skylinberg is a coastal city that started with a castle on this headland, and has grown outwards to encompass the nearby bays. The western bay so far has been much more densely populated, while the eastern bay is dominated by industry and military land use. And the northern half of the city is rural, characterised by farming, mining and hydroelectric power. The city has also developed an extensive public transport system over the years, but because the public transport info view is not very clear in game, I've exported the city to GIS to show it off better. Viewer, this is Skylinberg. Skylinberg, this is Viewer. She's butt naked right now, because the first thing I want to highlight is the King's Road, a major east-west motorway linking the whole region, acting as the spine of the city that all the other roads are built around. And of course the buildings, but I think it's clearer if we hide those for now. The first piece of public transport we built was a railway, which follows the King's Road east to west, and has been expanded on a few times to support the city's expansion. We now have 4 passenger stations, 2 large ones and 2 smaller ones, as well as 2 cargo terminals too. This is probably the quickest means of transport in Skylinberg, and is a convenient option for Sims to depart or arrive at our city. If people arrive at the historical central station in the west of the map, they can use the inbuilt subway interchange to access our metro system, which is great for moving within or between districts. With 9 stops in total, this forms a vital corridor connecting the urban core to the industrial estate and the historic castle area too. But if you want to travel overground and take in the city along the way, that's possible thanks to the Skylinberg Tramway Initiative, or STI for short. These trams connect the densest part of the city, first with the Renaissance-era Newport district, then expanded to cover the western half of the city too. And the final 2 methods of transport are used to cover the most niche routes that we haven't covered already. We have 4 bus routes in the city, one connecting the rural area in the north to the rest of the city, one connecting the polder to the rest of the city, and the final 2 are over here in the east, connecting up all these districts. And finally, water transport is our last option for our citizens. I've had to make some small changes here since you last saw it. The Bridges and Ports DLC has broken the more water transportation mod that we were using for ferries, which was causing the save to crash, so I've gone ahead and replaced it with the official ferries from the new DLC. Now we've got one ferry route connecting these 3 stops in the Western Bay to these 4 stops in the Eastern Bay and beyond. This DLC now distinguishes between ferries and ships, meaning we can't use the passenger harbour for ferries anymore, so instead this harbour connects exclusively to the outside of the map in both the east and the west. When you put all these options together, you end up with a fairly comprehensive public transport network that covers almost all parts of the city. With the layout established, let's take a closer look at the districts of this city. We've designated about 30 in-game districts so far, but they can be grouped into roughly 6.5 regions, with shared architecture, culture or land use. The first settlement in this area was of course the castle, which was built in the late medieval and utilised this fortified hilltop position to project power and attract people to this region. First expansion was the town walls, offering safety to the merchants and craftsmen who supplied this city. This then spilled outside of the walls, with settlements popping up around the local area. Over time, the surrounding settlements developed further until they matched the castle in scale and population. A community flourished around this jagged peninsula, but retained the old historic feel that once inspired this castle. I often refer to this area as Castle Hill, but I think the locals probably would too. This area is well connected to itself, but is lacking the transport connections compared to the rest of the city. and I think this would create a distinct identity for the residents of this hill. Its constituent districts include obviously the castle, which by this point in history hasn't been an active military facility in a long while now, but now is more oriented towards tourism and historical preservation. Right outside the castle gates, we have one of the nicest areas, which was once more of a slum, Plough End. Technically, it's divided into Upper Plough and Lower Plough, but they both share this white French aesthetic, and of course, it's home to the Notre Dame, the premier place of worship in Skylinberg, sat proudly atop the hill watching over the city. Around the edge of the peninsula, we have a series of seaside districts, all with slightly different inspirations, but sharing the remote picturesque themes of the castle. I'd imagine these houses would make a perfect place to retire to, or even bring up a young family, as this area does have a good school system and even a college too. There's an abundance of parks and public spaces with picturesque residences and impressive landmarks, and I think this area would be one of the most sought after to live in. More and more people were attracted to Skylinberg, but there is a finite amount of space on this headland, leading to the development of Newport, a Renaissance-era commercial hub centered around this waterfront plaza, perfect for trading and importing exotic goods from the New World. The immense wealth gained from this trade led to the rapid expansion of this area into a sprawling town focused around trade and naval infrastructure, complete with Amsterdam-style canals, dry docks, and even the city's first factory. The expansions to the north eventually grew into a beast of its own, with its own suburbs, varying from rough and ready to prim and proper and everything in between. We even built our own country estate, complete with an orchard, a hedge maze, and even a botanical gardens. But the Industrial Revolution led to a huge change in land use, as the first factories were built in Skylinberg, the largest being the paper factory, which sits pride of place right in the middle of the industrial estate. But this area also includes some of the most crucial infrastructure to the city, like a train depot, a coal power plant, and an incineration plant too, as well as countless jobs in all these other factories. At first, the factory owners built terraced houses adjacent to the factory to house workers cheaply and efficiently, but after an excessive amount of respiratory diseases, tuberculosis and typhoid fever, social pressure became too much, leading to the separation of residential and industrial land use in Skylinberg. Well, kinda. Pollution is the least of their worries for residents around here, as this was one of the first areas to be hit by the Great Flood of 1936, an accident at the city's new hydroelectric dam that had fatal consequences for the districts downstream. Some of the largest buildings were saved, but through bombing and flood damage, this area has a lot of derelict land, and is primed for redevelopment in a future video. As the city entered the 20th century, Skylinberg experienced a huge population spike. More and more people were attracted to the city, causing urban sprawl in the west, and included a lot of modern infrastructure that is still in use today. Things like passenger harbours, metro systems, and grand civic buildings. Districts in this region vary in inspiration and feel, from smoky industrial estates to clean waterfront districts to low-income housing, forming a sprawling conurbation that dominates the Western Bay. It's also home to the city's first university, a large urban campus with easy access to the Central Park and Central Station, but also to other large civic buildings in the area. But my favourite part of this region, which we built last episode, is Poppy Hill. Originally, I terraformed this hill to have a big government building on, but ended up leaving it blank and building around it until the end of the Great War. To honour the fallen citizens of World War I, the city folk developed this hilltop into a memorial graveyard, with a large cathedral as its centrepiece. Now citizens can come up here to mourn lost ones, while taking in the views and enjoying a nice walk while they're here. Meanwhile, the Eastern Bay has a very different story. The first development in this region was a star fort, known locally as the Butter Fort after its near endless reserves of butter, which has staved off starvation many times while this fort was under siege. It was built to protect the vital military infrastructure that was planned in this bay, as Skylinberg pushed to become a naval power in its region. The first attempt led to the construction of Gun Wharf, a naval base with a series of docks and inlets, perfect for ship construction and repair. And this newfound shipbuilding industry also attracted a small community that was based within the port. But before long, Gun Wharf's docks were outgrown by the more modern battleships, as size, speed, and firepower continued to increase. This necessitated a new naval base, one fit for dreadnought-era battleships. And so, the Butterport was born, featuring 2 large basins, able to accommodate multiple large battleships at once. Once again, this attracted new residents to Butter Island, with a community of officers and sailors setting up on the hillside. The final piece of the puzzle here is Jackson Airfield, located just uphill from Gunwharf. First founded during World War I, the city's air force has developed from an experimental branch of the Navy to a formidable fighting force of its own. Complete with a tarmacked runway, a series of hangars for storage, and some large warehouses to support aircraft construction and maintenance. This airfield ended up being in quite a good location, as it was the only district here that was safe from the impact of the Great Flood. Much like the industrial estate, most of Gunwharf ended up underwater, causing untold devastation and lost lives. Where once Gunwharf was the headquarters of the city's navy, now most of it lays in ruins, another location destined for redevelopment in a future installment. The only proper district not to be discussed yet is just round the corner over in Archangel. This settlement was established by communists after the 1917 revolution, and had barely even got its feet under the desk before being annihilated by the flood, causing huge loss of life and destruction of properties. However, much like the real Soviets, loss of life never really seemed to put these guys off, and I have a feeling they're going to have a strong resurgence after the Second World War. And finally, the least developed land by far in Skylinberg has to be this area north of the King's Road, in the foothills of the mountains. Besides our sprawling industrial estate over here, most of this land remains fairly rural, the largest settlement being Wheatley over in the west, but still being no more than a small village. Instead, most of this land is used for farming, with countless crop fields and small farming communities scattered along these gravel roads. The residents of Ditchfield might be some of the most nervous in the city, as they live in the floodplain below the Three Islands Dam, a recent engineering mega project to supply the city with near infinite power. But the dam has not had the best reputation so far, despite its power offerings. That's because this dam was responsible for the Great Flood, perhaps the most devastating event to occur in Skylinberg's history. But how did this happen, you ask? Well, I'm not going to name any names, but apparently they let architects build the dam, meaning it had to be completely rebuilt. Given the disaster will be fresh in the citizens' minds, I'm excited to see how this will impact the management of this water system in future. Similarly, this reservoir area is also home to the city's mining industry, with extraction of various minerals taking place. All of this mining will undoubtedly be causing pollution in this river, and I wonder how long it will take for citizens to be affected. Speaking of citizens, the final thing I want to do is welcome some new citizens to the city of Skylinberg, who passed the test in the comment section of the last video. I said anyone who shares an interesting history fact will be added to the city, and boy did you guys hold up your side of the bargain. So I'm going to hold up mine. Stupidly, I didn't specify that only the best ones will get added or anything, so I decided to just add them all, and my current count is up to 213. Starting with channel members first, because we are now up to 11 members now, lads. Thank you so much, guys, I really appreciate it. And please welcome to the city, Nightcrawler, Ryan Nowlin, Leo the Duck, who became a tier 2 member just so he could move out of the Soviet district. Hope you like your new home here, mate. Maselko, and Keith Jones, who wanted to be someone historical for each time period, so I made him Big Winnie C over here. Huge welcome to Gwendolyn, who is also a tier 2 member. And also welcome Jeff the Dumb, DeFlu, and finally welcome Bone Papstar. Now for everyone else, like I said, there's 213 of you, so I'm going to have to go fairly quickly, but I'll make sure to show your name and where you live.